We've got a little demo here that I wanted to use to show you how the recommendations can be used in order to trigger after page load for different types of pages. In our quick start guide for the template.js library, there's a quick start for the smart recommendations, and it essentially walks you through how to set up this Klevu page meta variable, depending on if you're on a category page, a PDP, a cart page. And then from there, you load the library. There's some code that will read what this Klevu page meta global variable is at the time that the library is loaded. And so that's what kind of hard codes the different page types. And there's filtering that happens. So if you're on a product page, you cannot load a cart type of recommendation, or if you're on a PDP, you can't load. So basically, the idea is that the page type has to match the type of recommendation that you're trying to load. That's how our system works by default. So in this video, I'm going to show you how, even though you load it with one particular type when the library is loaded, how based on a trigger of some kind, whether it's a quick view button click or a mini cart, adding an item to the cart, how you can essentially change the page type and what the code is that's necessary in order to make this happen so that you can load a different type of recommendation when that trigger happens. So I've got this little demo that I've created that essentially just has a home page. There's some recommendations on the home page. There's a category page that loads category page type recommendations, and then here's the category page itself. I've modified the product block just to literally just add this little quick view button to each one of the product cards essentially. Then there's also this mini cart functionality that will add an item to the page. And so right now I haven't done anything in regards to doing the stuff that we're going to eventually do. So essentially right now I've just got, like, if you add an item to the cart, it adds the item. You can remove the item. You can add multiple items to the cart. It'll update. So this is normal mini cart type functionality. If you click on the quick view, you've got this little quick view pop-up that pops up for whatever product you happen to have selected. So all of this right now is just regular plain Jane. This is like your starting point, right? So I just added another one of those shoes to the cart. Again, it all works just regular. So here's where it starts getting interesting. So we've got the home page, which is this index.html. I've got this catnav.html, that's my category page. And so by default, it's going to try to create this, again, just following our quick start guide. This is the minimum information that you need in order to load the category recommendations on the category page. On the home page, there really isn't a page type for a home page. It's really only the cart, the category, and the PDP that have a special type. Other than that, I could have literally just left this blank and the home page recommendation would still work. So there's nothing special there. Again, I just showed you all the functionality of what's going on there. I've got this banner, and then I've got my regular homepage recommendation. On the category page, I've got this, title information. So if I come back to the category page, from there you'll notice that I have this category recommendation, just a normal category page recommendation, and then here's where our category page search results are showing up. And then I've got this this modal that's hidden by default, and so essentially it will show up whenever I click the quick view. And so I've got just regular code to make this thing show up and hide and all that kind of good stuff. The quick view data shows up in here into this div. And I've got this placeholder where I'm going to add our quick view recommendations. So that's there. And here's the same thing for the mini cart. There's a little modal side panel that's hidden by default for the mini cart. By default, it's empty, but this is where the content would show up whenever there's items being added. And then I've got the same kind of thing, just a little placeholder for where I want the recommendations to show up. And then the rest of it is just like, showing the total and the view cart button and all that stuff. And then there's like this little modal background overlay that shows up so that I can close, like just to trigger closing either the quick view or the mini cart. And so that's it. That's like the regular, so whatever the state is of your current site, you should be able to just leave it as is. So what we're going to do here is, this is the code that essentially drives all of that right now. And again, everything that you saw is just being driven here. So I've got, my cart being stored in local storage. Because this isn't a real platform or anything and it's all just ad hoc, I'm giving myself like a global variable to store all of the product data. So whenever I load the home page or the category page or any recommendation, all of the products are being pushed into this global variable just so that I can pull it back up. And so I have these little helper functions to push a product in there so that it shows up or gets loaded into that loaded products, and then something to pull it back out. So again, just real simple, straightforward stuff. So you're going to have your equivalent of all of this stuff. Here's the function to add an item to the cart and all that kind of good stuff. And then here's the Klevu add to cart buttons that are essentially pulling up the product information and then calling the native add to cart function. This is my version of the add to cart function, which is just pushing to that variable. And then I save it, and then I can toggle to open the mini cart. So again, this is just regular stuff. All of this other stuff is, hey, here's how you render the items in the mini cart. Here's how you toggle the mini cart, toggling the quick view. This just adds, all that functionality when the page is loaded. This is where I modified the product block in order to, and I just called it out right here. All I'm doing is just adding this quick view button, and then I'm giving it a data-id so that I can find out what the ID of the product is when the button is clicked. The rest of it is just the default product card. That could have been anything. And then here I've got some comments in this particular code. Like essentially this is just to override the product card in order to add that. So that's just wiring that up. This code is only for this demo. This is whenever a request is being made, regardless of where it came from, it will push the items into that global variable for me. So that's all that's happening there. And then whenever the templates are rendered, all this is doing is just grabbing all of those quick view buttons and essentially assigning the click event handler to them. And whenever that happens, eventually this is what populates that product, the particular product that was clicked for the quick view. And then we toggle, we toggle the quick view to go ahead and show it. And that's it. That's the end of the code. Nothing special so far. So here's how we're going to do this. First, we're going to go ahead and add a generic function that will essentially accept a selector. And what this does is that this is how we're going to trigger rendering our custom recommendation. And we're going to essentially say, hey, here's the selector of the custom recommendation that we're trying to power up. And from there, it's literally just going through and finding all of the elements on the page with that selector, going through each one of them, calling it a Rex target element. It checks to make sure that there is an ID on the thing, because every recommendation needs an ID that matches our recommendations in our admin. Then from there, we're going through, and if we have any of those recommendations on the page, then we want to make sure that we remove them. And the reason why we're removing them is because we need to recreate that recommendation. So for example, on the quick view, if I click on the quick view for one product, that will load that recommendation, search request, everything that's necessary to load the recommendations for it. And so if I click on a different quick view, I need to be able to essentially wipe out that original one so that I can then turn around and essentially reinitialize or create that recommendation object again. And so this code down here does that. So I just need to make sure that I'm not adding the same recommendation twice. There's literally just an array of all of the recommendations that's been powered up. So that being the case, let me show you something. Normally, whenever you add a recommendation onto the page, what Klevu's library is looking for is the classes of Klevu-Rex. So any element on the page that has Klevu-Rex and then it's got an ID, we're going to try to power that up as soon as the recommendation script is loaded. Because of that, what we need to do for our new functionality is that we need to use something other than Klevu-Rex, because we don't want to power up, for example, on the mini cart, you don't want to power up the recommendation when the user hasn't even clicked on it. You'd have unnecessary requests, impressions being sent, API calls being made. So in order to unwire up these special custom recommendations, we just need to use a different selector than Klevu-Rex. So in our case, we're going to go over to the index page, and I already have all this code kind of generated. So I've got the placeholder for where we're going to put in our mini cart recommendations. And so I'm just going to grab that div and just place it in here. And essentially, this is what I was just talking about. As long as the class isn't Klevu-Rex, our library won't see this. It won't try to power it up. However, we do need the ID because we might power it up later. And we're just going to use a very special class. So this is our selector for the mini cart recommendation. Now, because of the way that I've got this, this website put together, I literally have to put in this mini cart twice because this isn't dynamic, it's just static HTML files, and I'm using the exact same mini cart placeholder modal in both places, so I just need to add that in twice. But again, chances are you're probably doing it as a snippet or something that's being dynamically loaded, so you can do it one time and not have to do it as many times as I do. But once this is in there, then the next thing that we need to do is that we need to essentially add a function that will power this thing up and call that new code that we just added. So in my case, this is that code. It's this global function that I'm going to create called Klevu load mini cart rex. It doesn't accept any parameters. What it's going to do is that it's going to take that Klevu page meta if it's already there. If not, it'll just create a blank object out of it. But here's the magic. We need to tell it that the page type is cart. It doesn't matter if we were on the home page when the library first loaded, if we were on a blog post page or anything, because we need a cart page type recommendation when this button is clicked, we have to change the page type to cart. The other thing that's required for a cart page recommendation is an array of the cart records. So I'm just going to loop through my object, and I'm just going to pull out each one of the products and create a new object that just has this item ID and this item group ID. This is literally just pulled out of this recommendations quick start guide. So if I look at the page type cart, those are the two things that it's expecting. It's expecting page type to be cart and this cart records, which is just an array where they just pushed in everything, each one of the products as item ID and the group ID, pulling that information in from wherever your data is coming from. In my particular case, I'm already storing that item ID as the product ID and the item group ID as the product item group ID in my cart. So my cart records already have that data. I'm just mapping through them, and that becomes my cart records. Then I'm just checking to make sure that there at least is an item in my cart. So if there are no items, then there's no need to do anything else, and I can just stop right there. I could have actually did this earlier and just avoid making any changes at all. But once you've modified this Klevu page meta, there's code in our library that registers those values. So this is the way that it gets registered. So you have to make the changes, then you call this Klevu page meta update, you pass in that variable, and then you just pass in this one. Whatever that means, that's what updates our library so that whatever changes you've made have been registered in our library. Then we call that function, pass in the selector, which is this Klevu Rex mini cart, and that's exactly what that class is. So it's Klevu Rex mini cart. And then from there, all of the code that we went through earlier will go ahead and kick in. It's going to find all of those Klevu Rex mini carts on the page. It will destroy them if it finds them that they've already been registered. It will clone them or initialize them, create them, whatever you want to call it. And then the last thing that it does is it goes through and then it powers up each one of those in order for them to actually be turned on. So this is the creation initialization. This is the powering up of the thing that was created, initialized, whatever you want to call it. But that's the way that it works. So that's what this code does. And so if we save this and come back to our demo, go back to the home page or anywhere where we've got an add to cart. Now when I add to cart, let's see what happened. Did I forget to save a file? I've got my index. I've got my ID for my mini cart. I've got the code. I did forget a step. Even though we added this function, we never called it. So that's where we need the next little tidbit, which is we need to figure out what the trigger is. In my particular case, I'm looking for the code. Let's see here. I placed it into, this is for the quick view registering of the buttons. I believe I added it where I'm rendering the mini cart items. Yeah. So I happen to have this function. This is my trigger. So here's where I would add that code that runs that function. So simply by adding this, every single time that I re-render the items here, that will trigger taking a look at what's in my cart, changing the Klevu page meta, updating it, creating, initializing those recommendations with that very specific selector, and then powering them up. It's a very key thing that we have to do all of those things. So now if I open up my, my mini cart, this will trigger the re-rendering of the items, which will trigger running that function, which will then turn around and do all the things. And so again, if I come down to that code that I just pasted in, again, all I'm doing is changing the page type. I'm going through each one of the cart items, adding it in there. Now this particular recommendation, because this is a demo store and there is no purchase history, I can't do also bought, so I just did a hand-picked recommendation, but this could have been a also bought or any type of, you know, cart recommendation that you want. If you did want to put a different type of recommendation in here, you absolutely could. You would just need to make sure that you're passing in the right information. And so let's go ahead and do that now. So for example, if we go over to the category page, let's do the same thing for the quick view. Same idea. We're going to reuse that same function where we pass in the selector. So in this case, for the quick view, I'm going to go ahead and grab our div. This one is only on our category page. So here's where my quick view modal is. I've got the toggle to close the modal. So if I go ahead and click on it, here's my toggle to close it. I've got the image. I've got all the information about the item that I'm viewing. All of that shows up inside of here where the quick view content is. And then I've got my placeholder for where I want my recommendations to show up. So I'm just going to add my div there. This time, again, we cannot use Klevu Rex or else it'll try to power up at the beginning. So just using any other class, in this case, I called mine the Klevu Rex Quick View, but it could have been anything that you want, but it does need an ID like a normal recommendation would. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. The next thing we need to do is we need to add the special function, and I'm just going to add it down here. So this one is called Klevu Load Quick View Rex. In this one, I do need to pass in the product because I don't know which product is actually being loaded. It's not pulling from some global variable like the cart is. So in this particular case, I'm passing in the information about the product. If there's no product, go ahead and stop. But if there is, then let's go ahead and make sure that we do have that Klevu page meta object if it's not already there. Then we start setting it. And again, this is ripped right out of our product page type. So page type is PDP. We need an item name, an item URL, an item ID, item group ID, sell price, and currency. So that's what these guys are here. PDP is the page type. Everything else is coming from that product record that I passed in. Then just like in our cart, we need to run this update function. This registers the changes to that Klevu page meta. Then we pass in, or we call that generic function, the render custom recommendations, and we pass the selector for the quick view. So that's our Klevu Rex quick view. Again, Klevu Rex quick view. That makes sure that that's the one that we're doing. And just like the last time, now what we need to do is we just need to call this function. So what I'm going to do in this particular case for the quick view is that I'm doing it when the quick view button is actually clicked. So essentially in my, after Klevu's templates are finished rendering for the category page, I'm grabbing all of the quick view buttons on the page. I'm looping through each one of them. I'm adding my click event handler. It's checking for the product ID on that button. I'm fetching the product data as this product item. If I don't find it, it stops. But if I do, this is where I can go ahead and log or power up, call that recommendation for that quick view to go ahead and do its thing, and I'm just passing in this information. In your case, you're going to just use whatever you have to go ahead and fetch your product data, and you're going to pass that into that function. Again, this one's for the way that I'm doing it, but you would modify this code so that you are passing in this information, and then the rest of it is all the same stuff that we've seen before. And so now if we come back to our demo, and we go ahead and click on the quick view for this one, now we've got our recommendations. Now I haven't styled it, your template's going to be different. This is just generic, but here's my recommendations for this particular product. Now this product doesn't have any similar items in the store, so if I click on it, I have no recommendations. Now, I didn't put too much time and effort. If you notice, there was the previous recommendation was there. So if you want, you can, you probably should empty out that recommendation ID when the quick view is closed. That way it's always starting brand spanking new again. But if I click on the next one, now these are the recommendations. These are the similar products to the product that I actually clicked on. And that is how this code works.